The Hadza live a very traditional lifestyle. They're semi-nomadic, moving when they feel they must, with very few possessions.
How are you? Nice to see you.
Another person I met from last time was Mustafa. When I met him last, he was learning herbalism. Now he's an expert in all the traditional uses of the bush, and he showed me what he'd learnt of the plants in this area. Yep.
Hako hamana mugurumbi yako. Mugurumbi yako. Hako hamana mugurumbi yako. Kateta otaishina.
It's the medicine we use. We take the leaves and chew it a little and then spit it out.
It
is to treat the ear. The moisture treats infection in the ears.
Nuba air. Maasai?
Nice.
These plants call it hamont by the Hadza. This is the medicine that you take if you have bitten by a poison snake. It makes you vomit and have diarrhea. This makes you get rid of the poison from the system. Then you can boil the leaves as smoothing drink.
Mustafa told me he'd been bitten by two of Africa's most poisonous snakes, the black and the green mamba. That's incredible. You don't very often hear of people surviving the bites of both a green and a black mamba. Sometimes people call the black mamba the 15-step snake. You take 15 steps after being bitten and drop dead. And it says an awful lot for their ability to deal with medical problems. This plant here is a common feature in this terrain. The Maasai name for it's alderpai. And that's where we get the name for the gorge, Olduvai Gorge, because a lot of this grows within the gorge. It's got another nice name too, mother-in-law's tongue, and you can see why. It's got a point and it's rubbery. But this is wild sisal, and amongst the native peoples of Africa, this has been used for making snares and for making bowstrings. Some people call it the bowstring hemp, and it's quite interesting how you get the fibres from it. Very succulent plant. What I need to do is to break it down by pounding it like this. You can see the fibres starting to separate there. Plant's comprised almost solidly of fibres. I learned to do this from Bushmen down in the Kalahari. The pounding is just the first stage. You can see the plant softening now. And what I want to do is to split it open like that, all the way down its length. Pound it just gently now. So now on the other end of the stick I've carved it to form sort of a blade shape like that. I'm going to use that now to scrape out the pulp. Now you get to a point where some of the fibres are starting to lift out from the pulp. What we do is we comb those out like that. And then specifically scrape them down to the bare fibre. You can hang those on a bush to dry. There we go, there's the raw material. Nice long fibres for which we can make very strong string. just add new fibres in as you need. The key thing is to keep these strands equal thicknesses. If one gets thinner than the other, it will tend to wrap around the thick one, and then you only have the strength of one strand rather than the strength of the two combined. These sorts of skills are disappearing because of the availability of man-made fibres. But you think about it, there's not a lot of effort involved in making this stuff, and it's completely biodegradable and just simply grows back. Mateli has his own string for the pouch. It's a simple strip of bark.
He said that, well, I'm ready. I have, I'm going on a journey, and I have the sword, a spear, and a stick with his food when he's going a long distance traveling.
The first job to do at every campsite is to clear the ground where you intend to pitch your hammock. Might look quite destructive, all the clearing, but actually it's a very small area. In a forest like this, things grow back incredibly fast. The key thing is I'm temporarily removing habitat, so there's anything that can bite or sting is cleared away. Already I can see in some of the dead wood here, it's already become home to the ever-present termites. I don't want those invading my home in the night. If you spend any length of time in a camp like this, you'll realise that very soon, a few days down the road, things start to move back in and take over again. So it's only a very temporary presence here. One of the things I love about travelling through jungles is the way any patch of rainforest is transformed into home by the simple act of putting up your hammock. It's strange, but in a place of such scale, your world is actually reduced to little more than a postage stamp. I'm really lucky today because it's dry. But jungle firelighting can be very difficult, particularly when it's raining hard. First thing you have to do is arrange some sort of cover in wet weather, probably using your tarp or some big leaves. But then there are a couple of other useful tips, and the first is to feather wood like the locals do. What they do is they look for wood that is dry and standing. They know that a big piece of wood is going to be dry in its middle, and they look particularly for wood that is white. What you do is support the stick on your shoulder like so, and then using two hands on the machete, push down. And when you've got a good number of feathers curled off the stick, you can then just chop them off. And there's your kindling to begin with. But even that isn't sometimes enough. And there's something that I've grown used to doing in rainforest, which is a very useful tip. This is my sharpening kit. In here I've got the stone that I use to sharpen my parang. But I also carry a small lighter and some rubber inner tube or rubber tire, either will do. And this is a real bomb-proof way of making fire, because it doesn't matter how wet this gets, it will still light. What I do is I cut that into a small strip. It goes a long way, like so. When I light that up, away it goes. Wherever I go, there really is no substitute for a fire at the end of the day. It keeps the bugs away, and it connects deeply with something within us. Before I can get on with the arrows, I have to get a fire going, the Stone Age way, using a kit dating back 8,000 years. The key item was this here. This is iron parites, and from this, with their flint, they could strike small dull red sparks with which they could start their fire. Their tinder was made from horse's hoof fungus, the same species I'd seen in the British Museum. Because the sparks we get from the iron parites are so cool, the tinder has to be very carefully prepared. And to do that, take a flint blade like this and scrape the tinder until you get like a mass of cotton wool-like fibres. The next job is to strike the spark onto the tinder, and this isn't easy, and the sparks are very small and very few and far between, so it takes normally a few minutes. Normally when I make fire it's straightforward, but this is different. It takes some perseverance. And of course eventually one lands in the right place and the tinder catches light like this. Take another piece of this fungus, which I will ignite now from this little piece here. Just blow on that. It burns very hot. And I put that in there while I can just about hold it. It's getting very hot now. And now there we have flame. One of the key things about primitive arrows is accuracy, and accuracy is very much a function of straightness. And that doesn't look too bad, but actually when you look down it you can see it's all higgledy-piggledy, waves all over the shop. And the process is to heat the arrow shaft over the fire and then to straighten out the areas where it's bent. This one was just the same as the last one a few minutes ago, and gradually now I'm starting to straighten it out. And then once it's straight, I want to dry these stems off, and then I can scrape them down a little bit more and then sand them. It's a lot of work, but well worth it. Sitting here getting to grips with these Stone Age techniques makes me realise how resourceful our ancestors were. The forest was both their DIY store and their supermarket. The machete is the most important tool in the forest, and yesterday I heard a story that really illustrates that. There's a story of Yukwana people travelling down this river when their canoe was about to turn over in some rapids, and there was this terrible momentary pause when one of the men had to make the decision. Does he take his pack with all his food and his cooking equipment, or does he take his machete? Well, of course, the choice was obvious, and he took the machete, because with that and what he knows about the forest, he can find life here. This is a very important tool here, but it's also worth bearing in mind that the machete or the parang is the most dangerous tool we use in bushcraft, because the length of the edge is so great. There's tremendous potential to bite us. There are a few things we have to know. The first is we need to keep it sharp, so every day on a daily basis you sharpen it. For that I carry with me a small sharpening stone, combination stone like this. But if I didn't have that, I could use a pebble from the river. Probably the best way to show you how to use a machete is to make something. And we need a bench to go in our camp there so we can sit comfortably by the fire in the evening, and that's what I'm going to make. To start with, I've cut a small stick to give me a measure for some of the pieces I'm going to need. And I need to cut some strong supports. And I use a measuring rod, and we just put a mark on there. That's where I want to cut it. I'm going to need a point on the end. So rather than cut through and then point it, we'll do it all in one go. And this is something that you can really only do with a strong, stiff machete. Just to cut like so. All ready to go. Perfect. So that's one. Rainforest saplings are fabulous building materials. They're straight and strong. And when you need rope, you just split a liana or two. With a bench as long as this, you need to put an extra support in the middle. Now, we lock it off. That gives a lot more support. What I'll do is I'll lash this on here. Everything locks together solid. Now we can sit comfortably and enjoy the fire. Having somewhere to sit down makes life a lot more comfortable in any environment, but particularly in this one, with all the termites and ants crawling around on the forest floor.